Indeed, the founding of the African Union by African leaders signifies a pivotal step towards empowering Africa to fulfill the aspirations of its peoples, but also its global responsibilities. Since 2000, the AU has continuously expanded its efforts in democracy support, developing mechanisms to combat unconstitutional changes of government and assist in establishing democratic institutions. Democracy, with its core principles of freedom of expression, participation of the people in governance, adherence to the rule of law, protection of human rights, and enhancement of social and economic justice, plays a crucial role in fostering a society characterized by fairness, justice, and equity. The theme of the summit, the state of democracy in Africa, comes in a time when democracy in Africa, at least in its present definition, focus on multi-party and regular and periodic elections, is experiencing significant challenges and perhaps what many may consider failures. These challenges or failures manifest in the inability to promote credible elections, inclusiveness, improved prosperity, and meaningful transformation and stability on the continent. From military coups in Mali in early 2000, which began a series of coups in neighboring countries, to the military takeovers in Burkina Faso, Niger, in Chad, Guinea, and Sudan, and the failed attempts in the Gambia, Guinea-Bissau, and Sao Tome and Principe. In the recent years, our continent has witnessed a troubling trend that threatens civil democratic forms of government, which had only recently appeared to have taken root on the continent. For us in Nigeria, and perhaps the same can be said of Ghana, we are proud that we have remained a beacon of hope and stability over the last 2 decades of uninterrupted civil democratic rule, which has been built on incremental progress, if you like. However, it remains an open question whether democracy has delivered the prosperity and transformation our people yearn for. Your Excellencies, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, let me take the liberty to remind us of that poignant statement by Amilcar Cabral, an African revolutionary and thinker, made in 1965 at the cusp of Africa's anti-colonial struggles. This is what he said: "Always remember that the people are not fighting for ideas and not what is in men's minds. The people fight and accept the sacrifices demanded by the struggle in order to gain material advantages, to live better and in peace, to benefit from progress, and for the better future of their children. National liberation, the struggle against colonialism, the construction of peace and independence are hollow words devoid of any significance unless they can be translated into real improvement of the living conditions," unquote. This poignant statement by Cabral, I dare say, remains valid today in our continuing endeavor to realize our democratic ideals. The real test of democracy in Africa, in my view, is its ability to deliver better quality of lives for our people, even as it allows equal opportunities for participation in governance. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, Your Excellencies, our keynote speaker today is His Excellency President Olusegun Obasanjo, GCFR. President Obasanjo is perhaps one of Africa's foremost progressive voices, a real champion of democratic ideals, a courageous voice across the continent. As I reflected this morning on my opening remarks, I recalled somewhat nostalgically my first encounter with President Obasanjo. It was back in 1978 at Ahmadu Bello University, Zaria. He had accompanied President Samora Machel to receive an honorary degree at the convocation ceremony at Ahmadu Bello University that year. I was a radical student leader there, Your Excellency. I was a student, the Secretary General of the Students' Union. We were full of excitement and anticipation. General Obasanjo, as he was at that time, delivered what many of us thought was a rather dull and reactionary speech expected of a military head of state. This was in sharp contrast to the fiery speech of President Machel, setting out what we considered a radical transformative path for Africa's journey against imperial domination. This sentence, of course, into wild and loud ovation, throwing our caps in the air. This lasted several minutes. This probably must have irked General Obasanjo. Within days, many of us had committed to memory President Michel's long speech, both in his original Portuguese rendition and in his English translation. Your Excellency, we are delighted to have you this morning stand on our side as one of the strongest voices and great champions and strong advocates of Africa's democratic transformation. Your Excellency, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, today promises to be an exciting day for us at the Foundation. This endeavor resonates deeply with the ethos of Sheikh Musa Yar'Adua, whose dedication to unity, good governance, and democratic ideals continues to inspire our mission. Those ideals form the cornerstone of our Foundation's mission and vision. The key summit objectives will be to assess the current state of democracy in Africa, highlighting the progress and challenges, explore the challenges posed by recent military coups and takeovers to the future of democracy on the continent. We would like participants to interrogate the current models of Western liberal democracy and explore models to align with Africa's historical and cultural landscape. We hope the summit will further strengthen continental collaboration as we continue to explore ways forward. Given the current global disruptive landscape posed by technological innovations and developments, climate crisis, and energy transition, Africa must urgently confront its governance and institutional challenges to negotiate its place in the emerging new world order. I wish to express a profound gratitude to the Ford Foundation and Trust Africa for their generous support and invaluable partnership, which made this summit possible. I thank all our distinguished guests, and as you can see, they come from across diverse backgrounds and diverse age groups, academia, civil society, and so on. And we look forward to all the conversations and resolutions which we hope will mark another giant step in our quest for shaping Africa's journey into a better and brighter tomorrow. I thank you for your attention, and I welcome you to the Summit on Democracy in Africa. Thank you, and God bless.
Africa is a very young continent, and therefore the youth voice is critical in conversations about our democracy. And it's in that context that I would invite Nalenghle Moyo, who is a journalist by training with a passion for amplifying youth voices through arts, with a background in democracy, rights, governance, and advocacy. She has been instrumental in driving impactful initiatives with experience in ranging across networks and organizations in Zimbabwe, Kenya, Mauritius, Germany, and the UK. Nalenghle prides herself in her embodiment of a Pan-African spirit, advocating for unity and progress across the continent. Please, a round of applause for Nalenghle as she makes her presentation.
Good morning. We had a video that was supposed to play.
These are curves encrypted in code, nurturing nodes, a generation of winning women who lactate electricity to empower nations, representations of graceful eccentricity, the peace in your PCs connected to a Christ-like divinity, majestically maternal machines. We are more than next of kin. We are luminal, a sight that demands to be seen, an intricate intranet, a world wide web of women who work well in skirts, who excel in white and blue collared shirts that aren't afraid of a little dirt, and that is why Our inclusion in technological conclusions will allow global economic growth. See, we have always been the worth in the African earth. Regardless of the fact that you fail to compute the importance of femmes in STEM, the notion that women can, the essence of equipping them with the necessary skills to seize opportunities in male-dominated industries. You do not understand the value of a woman, as if God did not through her give you value as well. You fail to comprehend the necessity of equity and gender diversity. Misogyny is such a disease, a vile virus that nullifies our degrees. But see, we went from Kunzi to Nodonetsa Musika to owning whole businesses, ventured in e-commerce to snap back at weak comments. See, we always be inventors and intercessors, predecessors of pace setters such as Enrika Makul, Regina Honu, Stephanie Kwolek, called to tech to keep systems in check. This is the motherhood being celebrated like we should. Banshee.
And that is what it looks like to meet young people where they are through creative expression. The video you just watched was created as part of the 2023 Women's Month campaign, which we ran under the theme Digital, and advocated for the inclusion and recognition of women's contribution in tech. Current and former heads of state, representatives from the UN, Ford Foundation, Yar'Adua Foundation, Trust Africa, and all our distinguished guests, all protocols observed. My name is Nalenhle Moyo, and I'm the Arts for Change program lead at Magamba Africa. Magamba Network, sorry. Magamba means heroes, and that is what we want all young people to be. We see young people as the heroes. Headquartered in Harare, Zimbabwe, Magamba Network is Africa's trailblazing creative and digital media organization. And for the past 16 plus years, we have been existing at the cutting edge of digital media, activism, and innovation. After our successes, having opened up the civic space and incubated over 200 artists, Magamba has begun to export our expertise to other African countries, including in Zambia, where we supported the hashtag Deaf Law Digital campaign, advocating for the repeal and amendment of the criminal defamation of the president law. I'm proud to say that as of December 2022, His Excellency President Hakainde Hichilema announced the abolishment of that law. What's the secret? We meet young people where they are. Magamba Network has an online community of over 400,000 people and an annual reach of 10 million youth. Our vision is to inspire young people to fight for a just, participatory, and green Africa. Because yes, we can no longer ignore the conversations on climate change. Later today, myself and 3 other young people will sit on a panel to dive deeper into the ways in which we can engage young people more. And as you have seen, that was one of them. For now, I'll leave you at this. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Now for our pace setting presentation for today to set the tone for this event. I will be inviting Professor Jima Bwedi, Jima Bwedi, who is the co-founder of Afrobarometer and a towering figure in the field of democracy and governance research in Africa. He has played a pivotal role in documenting and analyzing public attitudes towards democracy and governance across the continent. His leadership at Afrobarometer has been instrumental in providing data-driven insights that inform policy, academic research, and civil society initiatives aimed at enhancing democratic governance. Professor Bwedi's work has not only enriched the academic discourse on democracy in Africa, but has also significantly contributed to the global understanding of democratic trends and challenges on the continent. Please, a round of applause for Professor Jima Brady. We'll bring this down. All right, let's do that.
Yeah, so. Your Excellency, the Vice President of Nigeria, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, I bring you warm greetings from Accra, the home base of the Afrobarometer, and I do so on behalf of the governing board, management, and staff, and on behalf of the 40 network members of the Afrobarometer spread across 40 countries. I also want to express my deepest gratitude to my host, the Olusegun Obasanjo Presidential Library and the Shehu Musa Yar'Adua Foundation for your kind invitation that has brought me here, and particularly for providing a forum like this for me to share and use the insights from Afrobarometer surveys to help all of us chart the future of democracy in Africa. I have been asked to speak about citizen sentiments and aspirations towards democracy in Africa. But in effect, it won't be me speaking. It will be more than 385,000 ordinary Africans speaking to Afrobarometer field researchers over 2 decades. For us, all we do is to give them the microphone, hear them speak, and aggregate the data. Just a bit of background to the presentation I'm sharing with you. As has already been hinted, we are in very challenging times so far as African democracy is concerned. Since 2020, soldiers have pushed out elected governments in 6 countries, and several presidents have defied constitutional term limits to claim their terms in office. Other leaders have been using subtler means to erode democracy, weaken checks on their authority, and harass the political opposition. These setbacks have correctly fueled widespread speculation about democracy losing ground on the continent. Afrobarometer has documented the democratic aspirations and experiences of African citizens for more than 2 decades. What I share with you here are the findings distilled from Afrobarometer data spanning 25 years, including the latest and the 9th round of nationally representative surveys conducted in 39 countries from 2021 to 2023. And this, ladies and gentlemen, represents the views of more than 3/4 of adult Africans. So, as I always like to do, in case lightning strikes and I'm not here in the next 1 hour or so, I want to share with you a summary of the arguments and submissions I'm going to make to you. Afrobarometer data confirms the following: that Africans aspire to live under governments that are democratic and accountable. It also confirms that ordinary citizens across the continent have been fairly consistent in expressions of their pro-democracy sentiments. Even after we take account of the declining support for democracy when it comes to specific forms of it, particularly when it comes to opposition to military rule, there has definitely been a decline in levels of rejection of military rule as an alternative form of government. We'll come to that later. But we also contend that it is this weak and lagging delivery of democracy and accountable governance relative to what the people say they want, relative to the people's aspirations, that drives declines in faith in democracy, particularly when it comes to opposition to military rule. In consideration of the above, then, we believe that what African policymakers and policy actors and advocates need to focus on is how to boost the delivery of democracy and accountable governance, not less of it, how to boost the delivery of democracy and accountable governance, because that is what we need to do to sustain and deepen the people's faith, citizens' faith in democracy. Now let me get to the full presentation. As hinted, clear majorities express support for democracy and accountable governance norms, institutions, and processes, at the same time that they reject non-democratic alternatives, including military rule. So in the latest survey round, for which we have a full set of data, and by the way, the Afrobarometer is currently in the field, taking opinions again for the 10th time, and when the data is ready, hopefully we'll get the opportunity such as this to share them with you. But clear majorities express support for democracy and accountable governance, and that 2/3 said they prefer democracy to any other system of government. 2/3 said they prefer democracy to any other system of government. Africans are even more emphatic in their rejection of non-democratic alternatives, with roughly 8 in 10 citizens expressing dislike for one-man rule and one-party rule, and 66% saying that they reject military rule. But you notice that levels of rejection of military rule are not as high as those for rejection of one-man rule and one-party rule. So we just park that idea somewhere. Moreover, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, popular support for democracy in our round 9 surveys was not only limited to the D word. So we didn't only ask questions about democracy. We asked them, we tested their interest and their support and preference for many of the institutions and norms that you normally associate with democratic governance. And here too, we found overwhelming support for the idea of choosing our government through the ballot box. As many as 75% of our respondents say, so far as they are concerned, the ballot box is the only legitimate means by which leaders should be chosen. There was similar support for the idea of presidents being obliged, being compelled to obey court rulings. That again garnered 73% support of the people. Similarly, the idea of presidents complying to two-term tenure limits, constitutional limits, was also endorsed by over 7 in 10 of our respondents. This is a very important finding, and this has been consistent throughout since we started asking this question in 2008. So when I hear any African country where a leader is saying, I'm so liked by my people that I want to stay, I know that is false. I know that what they are saying does not represent their people. Again, there is strong support for the executive to be oversighted by the legislature. There is strong support for media freedom, and there is sufficient and clear majority support for multi-party competition as opposed to single-party or no-party rule. And again, I want to emphasize that because of the challenges we have for multi-party democracy, it's a tendency to think that people may want to try other forms, but that is not the case so far for the average African and for the average African country. It's also important to note that trends in many of the indicators of support for democracy and accountable governance, the trend has been positive. And so when it comes to presidential compliance, the expectation that the president must comply with court decisions, that expectation has gone up by roughly 6 percentage points across the continent if you measure from 2011, 2013 to 2023. Again, a clear and a growing majority of Africans say that it is more important for government to be accountable to the people than to get things done. When we started asking this question in 2011, 2013, only a bare majority, a small majority, 52%, endorsed that view. Over time, that view has gained even more ground. And this we consider to be a very important finding because we are talking about a continent which has huge gaps in government performance on the development front. So when people say, so far as we are concerned, we prefer a government that is accountable to us, even if delivery is a bit porous, they are saying a lot. And I think we have to pay attention to that. It is the case, though, that some trends in the data portend a danger for the continent's democratic development. Even though it is still high at 75% on the average, support for the ballot box as the sole legitimate mechanism for choosing our leaders has declined by 7 percentage points over time. Then also, the idea of, 8 percentage points, let me correct myself, it's declined by 8 percentage points over time. And then on the question of whether you support democracy or you like to try other forms of government, again, citizen support across the board has declined by 7 percentage points, with significant drops in several countries and maybe catastrophic drop in a country like South Africa, where in a 10-year period, support for democracy has dropped by 29 percentage points. Mali, where it has dropped, I've just been informed of a term limit or time limit. All right. 2 minutes, okay, what you can do. I think I'm going to sum up things in the interest of time, and to say that, yes, there has been some declines in some aspects of popular support for democracy, and I think what stands out particularly is opposition to military rule, which has weakened by 11 percentage points over time, and a decline which is particularly huge in countries such as Mali, in Burkina Faso, in Cote d'Ivoire, and in Cameroon. And that may possibly explain some of what has happened in those countries, especially the Sahel. In round 9, we asked this question for the first time. We asked a question about whether you would accept, you will welcome military intervention in circumstances where government is egregiously abusing its power for its own ends. And here we got a small majority, on the average, saying yes, they will welcome military rule, and I just want to, military intervention. And I also want to emphasize that the youth, young adults, 18, 25, were hugely supportive of that compared to the older ones who know better. So I'll park that here, but I want to just share a few statistics, a few of our findings about the supply of democracy compared to the demand, compared to expectations, because it is the gap between supply and demand that tends to create the problems that we've all been facing and are unhappy about. And when it comes to that, you are talking of a situation where supply has persistently lagged behind citizens' expectations of the levels of democracy and accountable governance that they say they want. And it has perceived supply of freedom of speech has gone down by 6 percentage points over a 10-year period. Credibility of national elections gone down by 7% over a 10-year period. President defying court orders has gone up. President ignoring parliament has also gone up. So basically presidential impunity is rising and so on. It's even worse when it comes to the supply of a government that has integrity, that supply of government integrity. So these things have been going down over time. But the upshot of all of this is that when we went back to look at what is it that has been driving declines in support for democracy, we found that obviously when election quality is bad, when elections are of low quality, they tend to depress citizens' faith in democracy. When government is governing unaccountably, when elected leaders are exuding impunity, all of them tend to drive support or declines in support for democracy. So far as we are concerned, if you are listening to ordinary African citizens across the continent, what you want to do is to address the supply gaps in democracy and accountable governance. And I think if we do that, we will make the life of the African Union, ECOWAS, and all of us much happier, and African peoples much happier. So let's stay with the people, let's support democracy. Thank you.
Please, another round of applause for Prof. Jima. Now, to offer us very short reflections on that, we have Dr. Ibrahim Assal, the Executive Director of Trust Africa Foundation, one of the sponsors and supporters for this event. He is the immediate past Executive Secretary of the Council for Development of Social Science Research in Africa, CODESRIA, Africa's leading social research council that has ranked the top think tank of sub-Saharan Africa in the 2016 Go to Global Think Tank report of the University of Pennsylvania. He's the co-author and editor of publications on academic freedom, the social sciences, governance, and post-conflict transitions in Africa. Please, a round of applause for him.
Assalamu alaikum rahmatullah. Bonjour, good morning, good afternoon. Your Excellency, the Vice President of Nigeria representing President Tinubu, Your Excellency, former President of Nigeria, Olusegun Obasanjo, Baba, Excellency Amina Mohammed, Dr. Darren Walker, ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Shishi, Dr. Jacqueline Faris, Dr. Shatima, all protocols observed. I bring you greetings from the board and staff of Trust Africa. We are a Pan-African foundation whose sole ambition is to contribute to the efforts to advance democratic governance and equitable development on the African continent. Our main focus is on responsible citizenship and accountable leadership in the search for solutions to the pressing problems that our continent is faced with. So it was with great pleasure that we accepted to partner with the Sheikh Musa Yar'Adua Foundation, the Olusegun Obasanjo Presidential Library, and the Ford Foundation in organizing this summit. Ford Foundation occupies a special position in the history of Trust Africa because it's where Trust Africa was incubated. But it's also with humility that I make the comments that I'm going to make here today, because one of the things I think I have learned for having worked so many years with the research community of Africa as Executive Secretary of CODESRIA, but also with the civics, social movements and civil society as Director of Trust Africa, is that there are no easy solutions. And we should claim no easy victories, as Amilcar Cabral would say. And the victories can be reversed. This is what we have observed also. That's why we're talking about backsliding democracy or a shrinking civic space in some instances. Trust Africa is based in Senegal, a country where 2 months ago, a new government led by one of Africa's youngest elected presidents was elected on the promise of bringing about what they call systemic change. You will hear more about that in the panel this afternoon when Aliou Sane and Pap Bassen speak on the different two panels. But the system that the people have issues with in Senegal is not democracy as such. So I completely agree with my senior brother, Jima Boadi, Professor Boadi, in what he was saying. People don't have issues with democracy as such. What they have issues with is the complex set of factors and processes and mechanisms that make democracy fail to work as it ought to be working. But also because democracy is not delivering on the economic promise that it also makes. So in addition to the supply issues that Professor Boadi has spoken to eloquently, I want to point out 2 or 3 things which we must pay attention to. The first one is the issue of broadening and deepening genuine participation. We have demographic majorities on this continent, the youth and the young people, the young people and the women. Young people are 2/3 of almost every African population you look at, and women are in the majority in most instances, who are political minorities. The demographic majorities are political minorities because they're kept on the margins of the political systems, basically. They don't weigh for much in terms of the decisions that are made. And I think that's an issue that ought to be addressed. According to the Moib Iran Foundation report on the implementation of Agenda 2063, I quote, "Though progress is being made, women's political representation remains the lowest scoring indicator in their index on gender and at the continental level. And the African average of representation of women in the judiciary and on the other hand has also been declining since the start of the implementation of Agenda 2063. So there is an issue here. We cannot continue to have 2/3 of the populations of our continent really being on the margins of the political system. And within that, there is also special categories. There are special categories that we tend to overlook. I'm talking about all the people who experience discrimination based on descent and the kind of work they engage in. People of slave origin, it is a large number of people who are concerned. People of low caste, people who are of different orientations, experiencing disabilities. So there are categories of our populations who are not benefiting sufficiently or not being paid attention to sufficiently to deliver effectively. And therefore it is perceived as not being able to deliver on the political and economic goods that it is supposed to be delivering. Therefore, as the vice chair of the Yar'Adua Foundation board has been saying, it's not improving the quality of life of the people, basically. And that's a result of a number of factors. So even where it is working, there are issues that have to be addressed. And so I think the important thing to pay attention to is that why are the issues of systemic change attractive? Why are the military governments who are military groups taking power in some of the countries in our own region being celebrated by large numbers of young people? It is, I believe, because of the conditions of living in most of these countries. So those issues ought to be addressed. And many of these issues are actually of an economic nature. And that is the underbelly of our democratic systems, which is very soft, which is where there's a real challenge that we have to address. So I'll just conclude, because I've been given only 3 minutes, and say 2 or 3 things. One, I think we need to reimagine and reinvent governance in our countries and make them really radically reimagine governance, taking into account this factor, and that is the fact that we have populations that are in the majority made up of young people. You've had Ms. Moyo today. Meet them where they are, speak to them in their own languages, get their views and perspectives on what is happening, and take them seriously. And of the women, of course. And so I think we need to reimagine governance and make it work for these people, for these categories, and get them involved in it. Secondly, we need to look at democracy as an ecosystem. And all the different building blocks, constituent elements of that ecosystem are important. Thirdly, I think there are, there's an article in the New York Times a few months ago, but it speaks to a report that was published by the Moib Iran Foundation much earlier that says that the future is African. The future is African. This continent will be the home to the largest number of people. So by the year 2050 or so, 1 out of every 4 people who meet on planet Earth will be African or of African descent. And that has significant consequences for us. And I think we need to take that into account in what we do, preparing for the future, particularly if you take into account the fact that the majority of those people will be young people again. So it needs, therefore, a reimagination of the governance systems, a reimagination of even global governance and its reinvention. And of course, the final point is, what do our regional organizations do in that context? ECOWAS and the African Union have been challenged in big ways. And I think there's a need to be really, really imaginative in dealing with these challenges that are objective, that are around with us, and make sure that we bring back into our regional organizations the countries that are tempted to look elsewhere. Because the salvation and the future of this continent is in its unity and in the implementation of, I believe, Agenda 2063, at least the vision that has been, that is carrying Agenda 2063. Let me end my observations here, and thank you again for hosting us, and thank you all for honoring us with your presence and for giving us the opportunity, Amara and Dr. Faris, for working with the foundation.
Please, louder round of applause for Dr. Brima Sal. In addition to providing general support for this event, Trust Africa also curated the youth panel, which we will have later from all across Africa. So please, a round of applause for them. Next is a performance by someone whom most of you already know. His name is DK Chukwumerije. He's a Nigerian spoken word artist. And also he's an author, he's a poet, he has won several awards, numerous awards. He's also published 8 books, one of which won the 2013 Association of Nigerian Authors Prize for prose fiction and was cited on the top 100 most influential African magazine in New Africa in 2016. Please, a round of applause for him.
Your Excellency, Vice President Kashim Shettima, ably representing the President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, Your Excellency Chief Olusegun Obasanjo, former President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, please permit me to stand on all other existing protocol. My name is DK Chukwumerije. I am a poet, and poets have a reputation in rhythm and rhyme for telling the truth. Like how our democracy is actually practiced at the grassroots, where too many times a vote is exchanged for soap and rice. So what is the true cost to our society for this compromise? It is this: these broken roads that keep killing our brothers, these men that keep raiding and taking our sisters, no lights to operate, children born dead, they can't read. It is these broken taps, so we drink from the river, no drugs to save babies from the scourge of malaria, earning a wage that can't support a life, yet we'll snatch ballot boxes to support a thief, just because he comes from our town, reads the same Bible or shares our imam, just because he hails from the same ethnic group, will endure years without any reasonable job, just hanging at the gates of their 3-story mansions, content with handouts and these rickety taxes, while the money that could be sinking foundations is funding the walls of our ethnic champions, all fighting for government to represent our diversity, when the one thing we share are these bonds of poverty. So, my friends, for whatever is worth, permit regional thought. If you represent justice, you represent schools, and those schools have teachers, if you see public office as a chance to lead us, if the lights come on and your building bridge is not funding your campaign with people's salaries, but fighting erosion, unite this nation. If you're tearing down walls to lift up this country, unite this nation. If you're tearing down walls to lift up this country, come from wherever you represent me. Yes, a Christian or not, if you're fighting for freedom, for the rights of each person to be treated the same, regardless of faith or ethnicity, if you stand up for these things, if our leaders stand up for these things, and there is hope for democracy in Africa. Because this is the dream, to cast aside the shame of this dysfunction and poverty and stand shoulder to shoulder with the rest of humanity. This continent that is the mother of mankind, how come we are the ones that are now left behind? With all this gold and diamonds under our feet, and the Atlantic and Indian Oceans lapping at our shores, with fish in our rivers and meat in our bushes, how come it's our children that are always the ones starving? Is it not a paradox to be thirsty in a land of rivers, to be homeless in a land of rock and timber, to be so divided on the oldest of all continents where man has lived for the longest period of time? See, if there is any is older than African tribes. The African is older than African languages. We must remember this. The songs our mothers sang to put us to sleep. The stories they told to wake our consciences up. The way it's lesson that when we join hands together, we're not easily broken. But where there is no wisdom to cross these ethno-regional divides, where there is no faith to look deep inside, and stop judging accents and surnames and dressing, this fire we're quenching, these democracies we're building will only keep falling. For what nation can stand dividing its